Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
I'm Hilary Dickman, a parent of two and Senior Assistant Director of Admission at Colorado College.
Hi, I'm Lisa, a clinical psychologist and a college counselor and a co-author of the book, The Calm College Method. I have one daughter who's graduated from college, one daughter who's about to go to college, and a son who's about to go to high school.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you, as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. Good afternoon, listening family. That's my name if you're new to the podcast, for the community of listeners who never miss an episode. And I'm very excited about today's episode because we get to hear from a number of members in our listening family, both today and on Monday's episode. But more about that in a minute. Friends, it's the little things in life that can bring you joy. So last year, we got our deck enclosed. And I love being out there on that deck. I'm out there all the time. I take my meetings out there. But there are a couple problems with the deck. One is the kitchen light, which is connected, wasn't that strong. So once I get to about 8:30 or 9, I oftentimes had to come in and move to my office for meetings rather than take them on the deck. And then also, Georgia can get a little humid. So we had 3 ceiling fans installed this week with really good lights. And now that is just my happy place. I'm out there, 10:30, the fan, the lights, the little things in life that can bring you joy. And friends, I love hearing from our listeners. And so Monday's episode 650, that's Grinding My Gears episode. So I'm going to extend the length of time you can send in what is grinding your gears about admissions or even college. If I hear from you by Friday at 9, we'll get that on the episode. Just speakpipe.com/YCBK. Now, friends, we've been having a lot of really longer episodes. I'm not sure if you noticed that. We had our first 2-hour episode in probably 18 months. We used to always have 2-hour episodes, but that was really before we had 2 a week. And then Mondays, which is supposed to be the shorter episodes, they've been routinely running over an hour and a half. Now, on the one hand, it's great. I always have a cadre of people who reach out to me and say, I love long episodes. But there are also others, and I'm talking about people in the listening family, that fall behind just because, other things in life. And so I'm going to have a little bit of a shorter one today. Not super short, but it's not going to be an hour and a half for today. So we're going to have one question from a listener. Hilary and I will talk about how does it impact your chances of admission if you're interested in a college that doesn't have your major. We had a listener send that in. We'll have the 4th segment of 11. I'm reading on the Chronicle, the article, How Bad is Higher Ed's Budget Crunch? Today's submission comes from former editor of the Chronicle of Higher Education, Jeffrey Salingo. And then Susan and I will share information about an info session that we think our listeners are going to enjoy. And then we'll have part 2 of Lisa's excellent interview with Dr. Tricia Seifert about using board games and video games to help you successfully transition to college. I heard from a number of you about how much you enjoyed part 1, so you hear the final part today. But before we get started today, I'm going to share several messages that listeners sent in. And, I love it when listeners send in these messages because it just makes us feel like a community. I like that feeling. I grew up in a close-knit family. So, yeah, it kind of reinforces our listening family vibe that I like. So let's dive in. The first message has to do with the conversation I had with Dan Chambliss about whether Rate My Professors can be trusted. So let's listen to this message from Kara from Arizona.
Hey, Mark. Kara here from Arizona. Just listening to your most recent podcast, and I wanted to add a little something to that. My own son graduated from the University of Tampa, and while I have lots of wonderful things to say about that school. One of the things I found kind of amusing that might be interesting to the rest of your audience is that my son said he had more than one professor who would give kids extra credit or a bonus, a leg up somehow, if they gave them a good rating on Rate My Professor. So I guess there are some professors out there who are willing to kind of rig the system. So for whatever that's worth, I just thought I would share that tidbit. Thanks so much.
Now, friends, it's extremely rare. I mean, this happens I probably can count the times it's happened on 3 fingers, to be honest, for us to have an interviewee back twice within a 12-month period. But the first time Dan Chambliss was on, and he talked about the $1 million grant he got from the Mellon Foundation, and he and a team of researchers studied how college works. We really got great feedback on that. So I said, hey, I found that Dan had some other areas of expertise. Can you come on back? So very recently, in fact, most of you probably heard it if you're regulars, Dan was back to talk about things like how to get the most out of college, why a quality liberal arts education is so invaluable. And that message resonated with Emily from Ohio. And so I want you to hear a message that Emily sent in.
Hi, Mark. It's Emily again from Ohio. Just had to give you a quick comment. I just listened to your podcast with Dan Chambliss, and I felt like it was speaking directly to me. I have a rising senior who loves history, and her dream would be to be a museum curator. And my husband and I are both engineers. So that episode was just so perfect, talking about the benefits of a liberal arts education. I love what Dan said about learning how to think right and communicate. And I love what you said at the end about chase what you love and what you're good at. That is my new favorite thing that you say. It's helping me feel like we have supported her in her considering history as a major. It's a little scary because we don't know any history majors, and everyone in my family and most of my husband's family have decided to end up working in their major, which I guess is unusual. So anyway, just some feedback that it was a great podcast and episode, and I appreciate you and Dan. Thanks. Bye-bye.
And finally, just last week, Susan and I took a question based on a question. You know, we'd had a conversation a while ago to a mom who wanted to know how her daughter's chances for admission were going to be impacted because she'd done gymnastics almost, for hours and hours and hours, but she wasn't going to be doing it in college. And does that mean that her extracurriculars were not going to be competitive for more competitive schools, as well as moderately selective schools? So that message and that conversation that Susan and I had last week, that resonated with Fawn from Hawaii. She heard the conversation Susan and I had, and she sent in a message about a situation that is very similar to this. So let's take a listen to what Fawn from Hawaii had to say.
Hi, Mark and Susan. I'm a mom from Hawaii, and I just wanted to add to your answer to a question posed by a listener about my niece's process, where she had to stop playing soccer due to an injury, and she played very high level club soccer as well as varsity soccer, and thought that she was going to be playing soccer in college. She had to redirect her whole process after her injury, and she still ended up doing really well in the admissions process and is actually at Duke now. So, all the time that she dedicated to soccer, I think it just came through what a dedicated athlete she was, how she worked really hard. And, she also developed so many different skills, which made her very attractive to many colleges. Thank you for everything you do. Bye.
And finally, I got to give a huge shout out to Sony Patel from Kansas City. Sony is using her professional background as a volunteer. She's one of those volunteers who stepped up when I put out a call for volunteers to help us get the word out about YCBK. And she's particularly focusing on Instagram. And so Sony and I had a 3-minute conversation yesterday, actually, and I want you to hear it. So next voice you'll hear will be Sony and I. Hi, Sony.
Hi, Mark. Excited to be here.
Thank you. Sony is one of the fantastic members of our listening family who reached out and volunteered to help us with getting the word out about our podcast. And she's working on Instagram marketing. And what do you want to tell our listeners, Sony?
Well, like so many of our listeners out there, I first became involved with YCBK when I was trying to navigate the college admissions process of my own 2 kids. I was really eager for trustworthy guidance in what often felt like a very overwhelming and confusing, anxiety-ridden journey. Over the years, the podcast became an invaluable resource for my family. The insights, the advice, the strategies that Mark and his fellow co-hosts offered us helped make our decisions a lot easier and approach the process with a lot more confidence. And that's why when Mark called out for volunteers, I became very excited to become involved with YCBK. I want to help YCBK families access that same kind of support and guidance that was so valuable to ours. And so we, Mark and I, are really looking forward to growing the YCBK Instagram channel. Mark and his team have created a valuable community of listeners, and we want to grow on that community. So if you're not already following us, please take a moment to go to Instagram, follow at YCBK Podcast, all one word, and please share our account with a friend, a parent, a student, a college counselor, or anyone you feel would benefit from college admissions guidance.
And friends, you should know, like, we had an Instagram account, but it was dormant for 5 years. They literally was dormant for 5 years. So I guess you could call this a relaunch. The other thing you should know, I was talking with Sony earlier today. She's going to be putting out some advanced clips before we even run episodes. So it's kind of a good way to see some of the topics we have coming up, speakers, interviews, segments, that sort of thing. So yeah, we'd be most grateful if you would join and if you would share. It's just at YCBK Podcast. And Sony, thanks for all you're doing.
Thanks. And if I could add one more thing, I know Mark and I talked about growing our platform, but we also want to get some feedback from our YCBK listeners. So if there's any type of short form video content you would like to see on Instagram, or if there's topics on Instagram that you think we should cover, please send us a direct message on Instagram or comment on our posts. Please do like our posts and reply to our stories and let us know.
Yeah, and I want to say a couple other things. All of a sudden, it just really hit me like, I don't think we're doing enough to get the word out, and I'm very serious about it. So this is the first thing. You're going to be hearing more later about a YouTube channel. And so more people should be hearing this content than currently are. I know if you look about the records, it says that we have the most downloads and anything in the college admissions space, but it's still such a small number compared to all the people that are out there. Mm-hmm. And if we think about our mission, making college knowledge available to all, well, that's not just putting out good content, it's being smart about marketing and being creative. You know, the other thing I just want to personally thank Sony. Here's how organized she is. So the NACAC, National Association of College Admission Counselors, our annual conference is in Kansas City next year, 23rd through the 25th Woo-hoo! Of September. That's 2027. And Sony's already said, I'll host a reception. So we've got one reception on the book like a year and a half in advance. I'm excited. So if you're
Kansas City is a great place.
Yes. Come put Kansas City on your calendar, you college counselors, for 2027. There'll be about 5,000 or 6,000 of us at the Kansas City Convention Center. So thanks, Sony.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, friends, let's transition to Hilary, taking a question from a listener about applying to a college that doesn't offer your major and how does that impact your students' admission chances.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Okay, Hilary, I'm excited to hear your answer to this question. So I'm going to play it and we'll get your thoughts.
Sounds good.
Hi, Mark and the Your College Bound Kid team. My question is this. If a student has a notable quality about their high school course of study, let's say advanced college level niche language study, like Russian or Arabic, including study abroad, and they are applying to a school that does not offer that language. Does this put them at an admissions disadvantage? Specifically, I'm wondering if an admissions officer would look at the student's profile and either think, number one, why would they want to come here? We don't offer their language. Or two, assume that the student will apply and prefer other schools that do offer the niche language. In actuality, the student is interested in said college that does not offer the language because they do offer full ride competitive merit scholarships, and finances, not language study availability, is the higher priority for the student. Is this something that should be explained anywhere? Are there any additional thoughts that you would offer to a student in this position? Thanks so much.
What do you think?
This was such a great question. I would say that being ready to like stop a niche language or a niche area of study when you go on to college should be fine. I don't think that that should hurt the student, but I do think if you're concerned about it, it's okay to use the additional information section to say, hey, I really enjoyed studying this in high school, and now I'm excited to move on to something different. I feel like that, like one sentence is really all that you need that can quell your fears, can, if there's a question in the reader's mind about whether or not you're going to accept their offer of admission because they might not have the thing that you want, then that calms those fears on the admission side. So yeah, I think you can use the additional information section for that. And I think it also can be helpful at a school where, like, if their Arabic program is really big and you've taken 4 years of Arabic, that can also be helpful for the admission process because you're clearly looking at the fit of the school and identifying something that you can engage in when you get there. So I think it can work either way.
Yeah, I think in this case, it's very important that you explain why you feel the school is a fit apart from that. And I think it should be more than you're going to be less expensive than somewhere else.
That should probably not be the answer.
Yes.
Except in your brain, which is fine.
Except in your brain. Because I do know of schools where that's like, this is not something that they like. And there are times when I never know, I'm not on the other side, but there's times I have very strong reason to believe that. I'm thinking of an instance this year where I had a student that got into, once again, one of those 11 most competitive schools that I talked about the other day or 6 weeks ago or whatever it was. And they never got into a selective liberal arts school, but nowhere near the level of selectivity. And I was, you don't know when you're not on the other side. You always have to be careful not to judge. But when you've been doing this for a while, you're going to have some opinion. So first thing I wanted to know, what was the level of engagement? And I don't think that was it. It certainly wasn't that essays weren't good. But this was a student that was applying to a school that does not have engineering, and she's all about engineering. And now, why was she doing it? Well, they do have a 3-2. It's very rarely used. Hilary, you want to explain to our listeners what a 3-2 is? I want to make sure we're not using
we have a
baseball
3-2 here at CC. Yeah. So a 3-2 program is where in engineering is where you do 3 years for your degree at the first school. And often it's a degree in something like physics or environmental science or chemistry or math. And then you do your second part, the next 2 years at a partner institution, and you get a bachelor's degree in engineering there. So you're spending 5 years to get 2 bachelor's degrees so that you can have a liberal arts foundation and then a 2-year experience in engineering and come out with a really well-rounded engineering degree.
Yeah, and I don't know this, but I suspect that the fact that they didn't have the program that she liked played a role. She just got denied. I don't know that. I wasn't on that. You have to be very careful when you're not around the decision-making table to be confident.
Did this school have, see what I see on the end where I'm reviewing an app is that we have custom questions on the application that say, tell me 3 areas of interest for you for your, major. And so this student, like the mom who called, I would imagine that student's not going to be putting her niche language like Russian or Arabic as the area that she's interested in studying. If she's applying to a school that doesn't have Russian or Arabic, she's going to be interested in something else. I would also hope that if you just because you've done 4 years of Russian or Arabic doesn't mean that you're like all about Russian or Arabic, the way that we
Mm-hmm.
sometimes see with engineering
Mm-hmm.
students, where like they're doing robotics and they're in the engineering club and they're in drafting classes and
Yeah.
they really like are very pointy engineering students, which
Sure.
can be off-putting
Sure.
because that's all that you see in their application.
Yes.
But if the deal is that you're taking 4 years of Russian and your application is much broader than just Russian, you're not just talking about your, study abroad to Kazakhstan or whatever,
Yeah.
and the Russian classes and why you love the Russian language, then I wouldn't be concerned about it. If you're coming across as a student who only wants to study Russian, then that's problematic because you're
Yeah.
applying to a school that doesn't have Russian.
Yes. Yeah. And you might be right, but I didn't necessarily take that from hearing the question that she wasn't planning on divulging that. You're probably right, but I never ascertained that. Like I thought, so that's why I thought, well, you got to be careful with that. Like not being interested in something we don't offer.
Yeah. That is problematic. If you're sending the message that what I want to study is engineering and you're applying to a school that doesn't have an engineering program, or where the 3-2 program is not a priority, or where students aren't taking advantage of it, or where you might not have sort of the academic chops to get through that 3-2 program, because those are hard, they're intense programs, and you have to have a certain GPA to be able to move into the partner school. Like ours is with Columbia. They're not going to take you if you're getting C's in all of your classes at Colorado College. And so we're sort of making that assessment on this side also about whether or not you can actually get through the 3-2 program.
You know what, Hilary, that's such an important distinction. And I'm really glad you brought this up, because I've been wanting to talk to our listeners about this 3-2 programs and how people should feel about them. Because, Columbia and WashU, they've seemed like they've got partnerships with every liberal arts school out there. I mean, how many of them do you see have Columbia and WashU? And they're not taking all these kids from all these schools. And that's sometimes the perception that people have. Oh, they've got a 3-2 with Columbia and WashU. And there's some others, but I just see those ones all the time.
Yeah.
They have so many partnerships.
I've been talking with the person who runs our 3-2 program. His name is Adam Light. He's in our physics department. And I've been asking him a lot of questions about our program recently because I'm getting a lot of questions from students about it.
Yeah.
And he says that most of our students who apply to the 3-2 program end up being admitted. But part of that is because they've known from the day that they started at CC that what they wanted was to go through the 3-2 program to Columbia. And sometimes they can apply to other outside programs that we don't have agreements with. Like there's a 2+2+2 program at Dartmouth, and there's a 3-2 at USC and places like that. And if they are qualified to get into the Columbia program because they knew since their first day of their first year at CC that was their goal and they've been working toward that goal, they're probably going to get into whatever other 3-2 programs they want, even though we don't have a partnership with them. But I think it takes a lot of intention and thoughtfulness, and you have to be like really disciplined in the way that you do your work and the way that you plan your schedule. And you've got to be willing to take critical feedback and to listen to your mentor, who is probably going to be Adam Light, since he's the one who's walking students through those programs. You've got to be able to take instruction in that way. And when you feel like taking a block of something fun and he says, no, you've really got to take this 300 level astrophysics class, like you have to take the 300 level astrophysics class and you have to get an A in it. And so it's a special kind of student who can do that. We have a lot of students who come in interested in the 3-2, and then they get here and they're like, oh, there's this whole world of liberal arts that I'm really interested in. There are these really cool people who I'm hanging around with. I don't want to leave here after 3 years. I don't want to rush my bachelor's degree at CC and then leave here when all my friends are staying for another year. And so lots of those students will end up doing 4 years at CC, and then 1 year. We also have lots of schools have 4+1 programs where you do 4 years and then you do a year-long bachelor's, or 4 plus a master's degree. So 4 years in the bachelor's and then 1 year in the master's degree. So those are options also. And our students tend to prefer that, even if they come in with the 3-2 in mind. I don't know if that's true across other colleges, but that's what we see here. And then we
No,
also have students who are like, I want to do the 3-2. And then they come in and they are getting a physics degree and they're going to work for some like, defense contractor or whatever in town in an engineering internship. And they end up graduating with a job waiting for them as an engineer, even though they don't have an engineering degree. You can do that. I didn't know that until recently. Like there are very few areas of engineering where you have to have like a certification that requires a bachelor's degree in engineering. And so it's actually a lot more flexible than I think most people believe.
Yeah, no, I've been wanting to talk about this. And you said something in the conversation I think it's important. Like, not all 3-2 programs I feel are the same. Well, they're not the same, but not all of them are as conducive to you ending up at the other school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have had multiple admission officers tell me off the record, like, honestly, not that many people ending up at that other institution. Like, just be mindful of that. Like, they're very leery of people coming to their school with that in mind because they just don't see it happening very often. And they've wanted me to just be aware of that in terms of counseling students. And so I think I always tell people to find out how many students actually do it, how many people do the program, and find out what the academic profile was of the students that were successful. See if you can get that type of information if you're interested in that. But I turned this question and flipped it into a whole 3-2 question. I think we answered it. And I think, then a very important distinction was made that, if you're interested in Arabic, like, and they don't offer that, you shouldn't be leading with that. That should be, because that can be problematic. Because remember, schools, and I always tell this to my families, because people always think of the evaluation as being strictly based on how your qualifications line up for the school and whether you meet a standard or whether in terms of when they think of the assessment. But I always tell people there's this whole other assessment that's going on. Is the student going to be happy here? Is the student going to fit in here? Is the student what they've described that they're looking for? Is that who we are? And that oftentimes factors into who gets in, especially at selective institutions, because one, you don't want attrition, and you also don't want a malcontent in the dorms, and quite honestly, you care about the kid. You don't want them to have a miserable experience. And so you are also assessing, is what this person offering who we are? And if it's not, you can pass on them if you're a selective institution, just because it doesn't feel like a fit to you. And this could be one of the ways why it doesn't feel like a fit very easily because a lot of times you have people study like, I don't even know if they did the research on us. They're saying they're interested in a major we don't even offer. I don't know. Any other thoughts on that, Hilary?
The one thing that is running through my mind, because I'm thinking about a language because this mom said like a niche language like Russian or Arabic. And I'm just thinking like that really shouldn't be different from a student studying Spanish or French or German for 4 years of high school. Just because your high school offers a niche language and you decide to take them up on that instead of sort of taking the more popular path should not be something that makes us as admission officers sort of raise an eyebrow. I'm thinking about sort of how we always talk about we're looking at you within your context, and your context offers a wide variety of languages. And so why wouldn't you take that opportunity? And I don't assume that just because someone studied Spanish for 4 years in high school that they want to be a Spanish major. So that's just something that's sort of rattling around in my brain.
No, it's important. And, in the back of my mind, it's how many times people change their major anyway. Like, I'm thinking about a lot of different things. It happens more often than it's not. I've seen 70%. I don't know if that's ever been documented, but you see that statistics quoted frequently. 70% of people switch their major. Obviously, and then even, we've talked about this a lot. Like, liberal arts schools give schools a lot more flexibility than schools that admit by major. Or even by division of studies sometimes, but certainly by major. Like, you really need to know what are the internal transfer policies if you're looking at a school like that. But, I think one other thing that was said that's important for people to take note of, though, is not everything that in your mind has to be shared with an admission office, right?
Yeah.
Like we've said it a couple times here. Like you shouldn't be leading with this is what you want to study primarily. If they don't offer it, that's probably not going to end well. Certainly not in your best interest to do that. And the other thing that we've said is if the financial package is the primary reason you're attracted to the school, keep that in your mind. That's legitimate, but you don't want to be leading with that. So
Yeah.
like, it reminds me when I interviewed Christina Lopez, formerly Dean of Admission at Barnard. Yeah, like we were talking about whether you should disclose, your mental health challenges. And it's like, we're not your therapist, and you shouldn't feel like we need to know everything that goes on between you and your therapist.
Yeah.
And I mean, for most people, maybe this goes without saying, but maybe for some people, they need a permission structure to know that that's okay.
For sure.
Cool. Thanks, Hilary, as always.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Great to talk with you.
Friends, what makes Susan and I so confident that you could benefit from what Christina has to say? Take a listen to this message that came in this week from Vanessa Hughes.
Good morning, good afternoon, wonderful people. I'm calling to leave a message to say that I'm delighted to learn that Christina Lopez has joined your organization. I am an IEC, living and working in Portland, Oregon, mostly with students and families in the Pacific Northwest. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Vanessa Hughes, and the reason why I'm really excited that you have Christina joining your team, most of the families with whom I work are middle or upper middle class families that can certainly contribute generously to their kids' college education, but they are not able to pay full pay for many of the private institutions or public institutions as an out-of-state applicant. And unless their kiddo is going to get some generous merit scholarships for high academic achievement, the cost of attendance is getting more and more burdensome. And this is I find that this is an area of advice and support that I'm being asked more and more from my families as an IEC. I'm trying to provide the most accurate information as possible with the fact that I'm not a financial advisor. So while I am learning in the background and families are learning that you're going to have this person on your team, so hopefully I can persuade Ms. Lopez and your team to do some episodes into a deep dive in the financial component, particularly for the families who will not be able to pay full pay and will be relying heavily on generous merit aid. Thanks for listening. Thanks for what you do.
All right, friends. Next, we're going to hear from a recording that Susan and I did with Christina this week. And it was really great. It was like a reunion. Susan and Christina and I, we all served on a board called Go to College New York City. And for those of you who are thinking, I didn't know you had bank like that. The nice thing about this board is it was intended to be a real focus on educational board. So yeah, we had to have the deep-pocketed people that could stroke the big checks, but at least 50% of the board was educators, like Dean and Director of Admissions at Wesleyan and Haverford, and that time Christina was at Barnard. We hadn't talked since then, or been together since then, since our last board meeting. Unfortunately, the organization ended up being defunct with COVID, funding dried up, and after 6 years, it was disbanded. But I think our last board meeting was 2021, and that's the last time we were all together. So it was kind of like a little bit of a mini reunion. And Christina's doing something that I think is pretty special, and Susan and I want to support it. So, we asked Christina if she would be okay if we let our listening family know about some of the things that she's doing. So the next voice you'll hear will be Susan, Christina, and I having a conversation about something that I think a number of our listening family or listeners could benefit from.
Hi.
So, friends, I became aware of something that Christina is doing that I feel is greatly needed out there. Susan feels it's greatly needed out there. And I asked Christina if she would be willing to tell our families a little bit about it. So, Christina, take it where you want to go.
Yes. So I am the founder and creator of the Dean's Desk, which works with families who are in that financial aid donut hole. These are families that typically make too much to receive meaningful need-based aid, but also can't write $90,000 checks without sacrificing everything that they've built. And financial aid is so opaque in this country, and I want to be able to teach families from my experience with 20 years in admissions and financial aid, how the financial aid system works, how their money is reviewed, how they can find schools that can be affordable, and how to build a college list that meets the needs of their student as well as the needs of their financial budgets and their financial goals. I do believe that college should be the next step for families, but it shouldn't be one that bankrupts them. So on June 30th, that's a Tuesday, I am going to teach a free masterclass that walks every family through the 3 major questions that every family needs to ask about each school before their student applies. Will the school actually make your student an offer? And when you're using those net price calculators, can you trust them? 2, do you have a real budget? And that's not a number. It's not a number. It's a real legitimate budget. And if the offer comes in over that number, what's your plan? Because appeals aren't a plan. Appeal is a tactic, but it cannot be your whole plan. And especially with the Parent Plus loans being capped in July, as we talked about, this is going to be a real important thing for families to know. I have seen so many families get blindsided by their financial aid letters in April. And that's when colleges want you to make a decision, but it's also when the most emotion is on the table. So it's critical that you understand the financial aid process before any applications are submitted. So it's free, it's live, it is not a recorded webinar. I will take questions at the end, and I hope to see you there.
And Susan, what were your thoughts when you learned about it?
Oh, just what a fantastic opportunity. I mean, college counselors, we know a lot about financial aid, and we work with families as they plan for the need-based and the merit-based financial aid process as a dimension of their college search. But, Christina's background and expertise is just going to allow her to get families off with the information from the beginning rather than coming around at the end and trying to dig it out of what looks like an impossible hole.
And Christina, if a listener wants to sign up, where do they go?
Yes, you can just come straight to my website. It's thedeansdesk.com and /masterclass. They'll find the registration there and they can sign up.
By the way, I love that name.
Yeah, I do.
Thank you.
The Dean's Desk. That was smart. I love it.
Yes.
Well, I have to say it captures the respect that the profession has for Christina.
Yeah.
Thank you.
She's someone who has spoken truth for a long time, and we've come to respect her highly for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, friends, I'm doing this 11 episodes in a row. I'm reading you an excerpt from what I regard as the top source out there for quality, reliable coverage on higher ed, and it's called the Chronicle of Higher Education. It is so worth my $10 a month to subscribe, and I'd recommend it to you. But I did this last year. I'd read a 6-parter to you on the same topic about the financial woes colleges are facing and the duress that they're under. Well, they're back with not a 6-parter, an 11-parter called How Bad is Higher Ed's Budget Crunch? 11 experts unpack a crisis we all knew was coming. And we're up to 4 of 11. 11 seems like a really big number when you take it on, but especially with 2 episodes a week, it goes really fast. So this is by Jeff Salingo, and it's entitled, Don't Delay the Inevitable. Let me read it. In 2012, I contributed to a research paper that found approximately 1/3 of all colleges faced an unsustainable financial future. Wow, that was almost 15 years ago. Years later, when the authors and I revisited the analysis, we found that not much had changed. Although colleges knew for much of the last decade that an enrollment bust was coming, they largely coasted, helped by historic rates of high school graduates going to college, a solid stock market, and a boom in online and international enrollment. That decade of delaying the inevitable is over. Not only is the enrollment cliff here, but it arrived alongside forces few could have foreseen. A collapse in public confidence in higher ed. Okay, I have to stop this just for a sec. This week, I saw a survey that NBC News took about whether or not students or families thought that higher ed was worth it. And while 55% of Democrats thought higher ed was worth it, and that actually scored higher than their faith in any other institutions, whether it was media or government or military, it was the highest. For Republicans, the number was 18%. Only 18%, less than 1 in 5, felt that higher ed was worth it. They had confidence in higher ed. So anyway, let me just go back and read that again. I didn't mean to stop that. All right, let me start a little bit over here. The decade of delaying the inevitable is over. Not only is the Roman cliff here, but it arrived alongside forces few could have foreseen: a collapse in public confidence in higher education, federal cuts to university research budgets, and policies that have choked off international student enrollment, plus an athletics arm race that shows no signs of slowing. Together, they've turned a long-anticipated financial reckoning into something far more acute. While colleges that draw from national and international pools will manage their way through, roughly half of the students at four-year institutions attend one within 50 miles of their home. Many of those campuses sit in the Northeast and the Midwest, which will see some of the steepest declines in high school graduates by the 2040s. Those colleges are at real risk, and yet most of them have continued business as usual. Deficit spending, dipping into their endowments, cutting around the edges. They're like struggling malls that have just enough foot traffic to keep a few stores open, but they shrink every year into shadows of their former selves. It's a nice analogy. I like a good analogy. Here's what needs to change. The kind of program cuts we're now seeing at Syracuse, Indiana, East Carolina, and several others are necessary, but they need to be more strategic. Rather than eliminating low enrollment or expensive programs indiscriminately, colleges should focus on degrees that provide value to students in the job market. That isn't an excuse to gut the liberal arts and humanities. It's an argument for making them stronger in an AI-driven economy by infusing them with work-based learning, connecting what students study to how they'll actually earn a living. Some institutions also need to rethink their mission. The share of American teenagers enrolling in college after high school has dropped from 70% in 2016 to 62% in 2022. Many of those students are working locally or doing nothing at all. That's an opportunity for colleges in their own backyard. Rather than chasing students in distant growing states, which is a losing strategy, an analysis by the enrollment management firm EAB of roughly 200 institutions found that students within 50 miles were 5 times more likely to apply than those over 1,000 miles away, and nearly twice as likely to enroll. Finally, more mergers need to happen, and not just stronger institutions absorbing weaker ones. Gannon University, a small tuition-dependent institution in Pennsylvania that fits the profile of an at-risk institution, went looking for a partner because, as its president told me, standing still felt riskier. Gannon and Ursuline College in Ohio are expected to complete their merger this summer. More presidents and boards need to reach that conclusion before the choice is made for them. Jeffrey Slingo, former editor of the Chronicle, special advisor to President of Arizona State, and author of several best-selling books on higher ed. All right, next up, 5 of 11, an article by Catherine Hill. And Catherine Hill is the president emerita of Vassar College and a senior advisor at Ithaca, SNR. And Catherine Hill's article is called Collaboration is the Way Forward. All right, friends, let's transition to the final part of Lisa's interview with Dr. Tricia Seifert on using board games and video games to help students successfully transition to college.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
friends, it's time for the final part of Lisa's interview with Tricia Seifert, professor at Montana State University. And in part 2, Tricia continues to elaborate on the value of using gameplay to help students successfully transition to college. Tricia explains why there is both a board game and a video game to help students with their college transition. Tricia explains how the game can be played both individually in solitude as well as in teams. And she explains the type of student that tends to like the video game more. And here's a great quote from Dr. Tricia Seifert. We can be what we can see. She explains what she means by that. Tricia gives some great advice for parents and for college counselors. Tricia shares where people can get the board game, as well as some additional tips to help your student transition to college. And friends, if you want to know where you can get that, you can just go to a website called successprintscrashcourse.com. successprintscrashcourse.com. And if you're interested in following Tricia on either Instagram or Facebook, it's just at success.prints. Listen and enjoy.
As students are preparing for this transition, it's making them simply aware that a transition is about to happen and that they're not going to have it all dialed in, and normalizing that. Like literally just saying, it's okay if you're still figuring things out, to recognize that challenging situations and getting through them is how we grow as humans. It's how we learn as people. And so if everything is always kittens and rainbows, like you're not learning anything. And so this normalizing that having to go through hard stuff is what makes us better people.
Yeah.
It's what makes us better citizens and better workers and better employees and just more empathetic humans. And so I think normalizing and having those conversations, and that's what gameplay often invites, is some storytelling. As you turn over a card or as you encounter a situation within the video game, it's a chance to actually have some conversation with your kid about what that was like for you. How have you handled a difficult social interaction? And it's interesting how, while kids might not have that conversation if they have to look directly at their parent or at another adult, but if they can kind of look down on a game board or be looking at a computer screen as they're having a conversation, they may start to have a deeper dialogue, and then they turn and look you in the eye, and that's where the real connection piece happens.
Yeah, that's
So
such a great point.
the
Because
board allows a place to begin that dialogue.
yeah, I think a lot of times people, if they're focused on a task, and the task in this case is playing the game, they can actually get through some of their anxieties about connecting with people and become more open. And I think that this game is a great way. So you mentioned there is the board game and there's the video game. So tell us more about the advantages and disadvantages of each of those.
Yeah, they're designed in many ways as complementary to one another. The way we first conceived of the video game, that was always the long-term plan. But I got some feedback early on saying, man, if you go straight out of the gate with a video game, one, you don't know if your concept really resonates with the target audience. So test out your ideas in a different kind of medium. And that's why we created the board game. The board game was designed literally to test ideas for the video game. Until we started prototyping and playtesting, and I had teachers ask me, how do I get a copy of this game? And I thought, oh gosh, maybe we have to rethink this. And so that's when we went to commercialize the board game and make it available. It's manufactured in the United States, and it's available for classrooms to be played in a class, in counseling meetings with groups of students, around family dinner tables. And so it really serves all of those different points. And it's a place, it's for up to 4 players or teams. We play often in schools, we play in teams of 2. And that's really exciting because now that team has to figure out how they're going to manage their time placement around the game board. And there's learning that happens just between that team. The video game, designed and played off of a web browser, so there's nothing to download, is really designed in mind for that when you can't get three other
Mm-hmm.
people around a game board, but you want to test things out maybe in your own time, in your own place. It allows some self-reflection without having others around the game board. So it really serves complementary purposes.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So, do you get feedback from kids about which one they prefer?
You know, it's interesting. It's by the person. There
Mm-hmm.
are some kids for whom sitting down and playing in a board game situation with others is actually anxiety provoking. And they're like, I don't want to do this. But they dive in to the video game world and they gain so much. And I've heard experiences where teachers will say, yeah, this student, they're just completely immersed. They want to know, how do I continue to maximize my GPA and how do I maximize my social points? And I'm concerned about my energy going down, and they're so into it. And then there are other students for whom, like, walking around a virtual game world is just not their jam. They would rather be in an analog board game space. And that's why I think there's real value in having both available,
Mm-hmm.
whether that be around in a family or within a school or after school program.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So, what advice do you give parents of kids about ready to go to college, of which I am one? So I have a kid going to college in the fall. What can you tell us about what we should do to best prepare our kids?
I think back to when I was having a conversation with my parents all these years ago, and we talked nonstop about where I was going to go to college, but we didn't spend hardly any time talking about what was I going to do when I got there. And I really think that having a conversation with your kid, with your student, about what excites them about attending this college. How do they want to make the most of that investment in attending that college? Like, what are they actually concretely going to do to seek out once they arrive on a college campus? And I think making it clear that going to class and the expectation of going to class is your expectation and should be theirs as of their own as well is number one. But it may also be what clubs or organizations interest you. And sitting down with your college bound kid and looking at the student clubs and organizations page on that college website. Like, okay, when they have the college fair, what are the 3 clubs you're going to seek out and sign up for so that you learn about their first club meeting? So many of our high school students are incredibly involved and they contribute in their community and their school, and then they get to college and they're not sure how to re-engage in those same productive and exciting ways. And so I think having sort of a plan ahead of time that parents can foster with their kid is really important. Asking, how are you going to make the most of this? And then again, I think normalizing that having worries or concerns is normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking through, okay, I can imagine a student saying, I'm not really sure how to take notes. I haven't had to take notes in high school. I've done really well, and my learning strategies are maybe not super well polished. Okay, that is a worry or a concern, how to take good notes. What are the resources on that college campus that address that? And sitting down beforehand and going through the website and maybe putting together a scavenger hunt for those offices and programs so that your student can go and check them out in their first week, and that it's a curated list based on their interests and concerns. And then talking to them about it. Like, what did you learn when you went to, the Academic Learning Management Strategy Center, whatever it was called? What did you hear from them? What programs or what workshops do they have available? It's showing that interest and continuing to engage in the experience, not solely in the selection of where to go to college.
Yeah, no, I think that is so vital, and it is something our society just doesn't really like. There's the college admissions process, and then that's it. Good luck, pack up. What's your dorm room going to look like is going to get more attention from a lot of
Yeah.
families than, what do you think you need to do to be successful at college? And I was a first gen student myself. And when I got to college, I had no idea what office hours were. I had no idea, like when they started saying my office hours or this, I was like, well, why would you need that? What is that? And originally, I was terrified to go talk to a professor in office hours, but it became unavoidable because things were hard and I needed help. And then over time, I got much more comfortable with it. But that is something that I didn't even know existed, you know.
Yeah.
And so a game like this would have been so helpful. And I think too, like I'm hoping that maybe organizations that do work with first gen students, like this would be an especially useful tool for them to introduce these concepts in a fun way that's not too overwhelming to first gen kids before they get to college.
That first generation college student was really at the center of my thinking when we sat down and started brainstorming. I've had so many people say, oh, I wish I had this before I went to college, playing with friends. They're like, this would have been so valuable, but it's particularly valuable if this language is all new. If you can practice and play and sort of test out different strategies truly before the consequences are real, that makes a major difference, I think. And so we're excited about getting the game into those spaces that can really be used in college access programs to invite students to think and to observe themselves. And it's really interesting. I've played literally hundreds and hundreds of times with different middle school and high school age, college age students. And there are moments when there is this aha that happens within a player. And I think back to playing with a first year student in college, and she said to me, I'm playing this game just like I'm living my real life. And I was like, oh, tell me more. She's like, so far in the game, I'm doing really well with GPA, and I'm doing really well in my classes. Like, but in the game, I don't have any friends and I don't have many social points. And that's kind of how I feel right now on campus.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, what would you do in the next half of the game if you want to make some friends and gain some social points? And she's like, I have to make an effort to go to that event and to spend enough time at an event where I can make a friend. And I was like, how does that translate to real life? And she's like, I have to leave my residence hall room and I have to get out and meet people. And I was like, yep, that's pretty much like, it's just interesting to hear these connection points from actual students, and for having students say, I remember playing years ago with a student in a rural school in Montana, enormously, like such a small graduating class. And she's like, I didn't know that I could see myself going to college because it seems so overwhelming. It's such a big place compared to my small rural community. But now I can see it. Like, I actually can see myself going to college. And I was like, awesome. Fast forward a year later, I'm clicking through a community college website, and that young woman is on the front page.
That's awesome.
It was so unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
But we can be what we can see. And so gameplay invites students to see themselves in this new world that maybe they haven't. If you're a first generation college student, you haven't been able to see yourself before because it's foreign. But it invites an imagination, which I think is really exciting.
That is really exciting. And I think I always say as a psychologist that it's a design flaw in human nature that we can only learn or make progress through pain. Like pain is the best teacher, suffering is the fastest teacher. But maybe if people can do it in the game where they lose, they just suffer a little bit, but they could still get the points,
Yeah.
that would be awesome. So because especially for a first gen student, some of those lessons that they learn through the hard knocks, that could be fatal for their college experience if they don't have
Yes.
anybody or anything to back them up. So,
Yeah. If you have limited margin,
mhm.
every single decision feels so weighty. And so if you can practice ahead of time and see where those pitfalls might lie, you can make different choices.
That's great. So, a lot of college counselors listen to this podcast as well. So, what would you tell college counselors? What advice would you give them?
Similarly, I think I would share with college counselors that they spend a lot of time in the conversation around where to go to college and perhaps what to study once you get there. And that seems to be the centerpiece of most college going conversations. And then obviously the cost
Hmm.
of college is a huge concern. And so I would invite college counselors to also have the conversation about what will you do once you arrive on that campus. Not only what will you study, because the truth of the matter is a non-trivial number of students change their major.
Hmm.
I changed my major. When I asked this question in a group of adults, I feel like at least half of the people raised their hand that they changed their major, maybe not just once, but twice. And so making all decisions based on the name of the college and what you're going to study without giving also the thoughts of what will you do when you get
Hmm.
there and how do you balance the cost of attendance. So if you're going to go to a campus that's going to really stretch you financially, will you have the bandwidth? Will you have the finances to do some of the other things that you might want to do? And so I think college counselors and high school counselors are so dialed in. Certainly in Montana and in other states, I know dual enrollment and dual credit and helping students amass college completion credits before even graduating high school has just taken off. I mean, Lisa, I don't know your age, but I can tell you,
Yeah, there wasn't
my
like that.
in my cohort of high school students, I can think of one person who drove off high school campus to go take a college course. That is now a commonality.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to drive to the campus. Your high school teachers are now teaching that course for both high school credit and college credit. I think filing the FAFSA the moment the portal opens, and the importance of filing FAFSA so that you're not only eligible for federal financial aid, but for so many state
Yeah.
universities, a FAFSA on file is required to be considered for state aid and for institutional loans and institutional scholarships. So filing the FAFSA as soon as possible and then being really open. There's a multitude of pathways for college completion these days. There are large growing apprenticeship
Hmm.
programs and in far more areas of study than in the trades, which I think is typically associated with apprenticeship. There's associate to bachelor's degree transfer programs where you start at a 2-year community or tribal college and continue on to complete your bachelor's degree, living at home for a portion and saving some money that way. I think there's just a wide variety. And I think to the extent that counselors can paint that broader picture would be really helpful.
Yeah, just that there are so many different options out there for families and students. And I always tell people that like you shouldn't take on a lot of debt to go to college, and there's always a way to figure out how to do it where you don't have to do that. And that is, infinitely preferable to having a lot of debt because in my psychotherapy practice, I have worked with a lot of people in their late 20s, early 30s, and they did not graduate. They have a
Yeah.
ton of student loan debt And it literally is the biggest decision variable in every decision that they make in their lives. It highly limits where they can live. It highly limits, what they can do. And they might
Yeah.
might want to be able to take like a lower paying job to get to a higher paying job. They cannot do it. And I think that's only going to get worse now that we have taken out some of the flexibility in the repayment plans. So, it's really important to think about that. And, for everyone, parents, counselors, teachers, to really just keep that in mind. 'Cause the cost is more than just the money.
The cost is more than tuition, for sure. I mean, there's the opportunity cost if you're of not working or working less. So how to balance those two things. Fees are a real issue that needs to be discussed as well. So tuition and fees. The cost of living exists in either case, right? You're going to pay for a cost of living whether you're in college or not. So recognizing that, I think, is important in the college going conversation. But if you are required to live on campus, like, is that a manageable amount? Is that a manageable amount for 1 year, knowing that you can have different options in years 2, 3, 4, maybe 5? And so I think just having a broader discussion about and yet at the same time, a broader discussion that shows all of the options can also feel overwhelming. So I do recognize that painting a fullest picture of what's possible can shut down people because they're like, there's just too many possibilities. I can't possibly decide.
Right.
So it can lead to decision paralysis.
Which, getting back to the game, like the game is a contained space. Like it has limited decision possibilities, and so it allows people to make those decisions, to rehearse those decisions in that sort of more contained, safe way, which is really amazing. Well, this has been really fantastic. You've given us so much great information. So where can we get our hands on this game? I totally want to get it and play it with my family before kids head off to college this fall. So where can we do that?
Yeah, so you can order the game at successprintscrashcourse.com. And you can also follow us and learn more on our LinkedIn profile at Success Prints Games for Higher Education, or at success.prints on Instagram and Facebook. We share loads of tips for parents and educators and family members talking about the transition to college and success in the first year and beyond. So we welcome you to follow us, order a game, the board game or the video game.
Yes, well, and we'll put this in the show notes too, so that people can have access to that in case they're driving a car and can't write all this down. But I think it's a really novel, creative, great idea and a really wonderful way to approach college preparedness that is fun. It's not just sitting down and, like learning how to take notes, but it's fun. And I think that really encourages it for families. So thank you so much. I really appreciate all this.
Thank you. It was wonderful to visit with you.
Friends, on Monday's episode, it's the Big 650. As promised, our listeners sound off on what's grinding their gears, and we'll have some commentary. And as promised, 5 weeks in a row of content on successfully transition to college is what you'll be getting. So you're going to hear Mickey from Rollins, and she has been an expert for 25 years. And so I'm going to interview Mickey Meyer, who has worked at 5 institutions. She's now at Rollins College, where she's been for quite a while, close to 20 years. And she's an expert on the importance of the first 6 weeks, those first 6 weeks. And so we spend over an hour over the next 3 weeks talking about what students can do in those first 6 weeks to help their successful transition to college. Now, friends, suppose you were talking to a senior who's about to graduate from college, and you asked him or her, any idea what you're going to do for work post-graduation? Now, suppose this student said, it doesn't really matter. Whichever company is the largest that offers me, that's where I'm going to go. Now, you probably would either think to yourself or maybe even say directly to the student, well, what if you don't like the people at the company? And suppose the student said, all that really matters to me is that it's the biggest company. To which you might say, well, what if you don't like the pay and compensation? And what if the student said, all that really matters to me is it's the biggest company? To which you might say, well, what if it's not in a good location? What if the commute is too far? To which the student says, all that really matters to me is it's the biggest company. To which you say, well, what if the job description they want you to do isn't going to be rewarding for you? To which the student says, all that really matters to me is it's the biggest company. To which you say, well, what if it's a dead-end job? It has no opportunity for upward mobility and for promotion. It doesn't have much of a future. To which the student says, all that really matters to me is the biggest company. Now, friends, that might sound nonsensical, but that's exactly what too many students do when it comes to college. But it isn't about the biggest company or the biggest school that drives them, but rather, whichever college is the hardest to get into, that's the one I'm going to go to. Just last night, I was doing a session at 11:30. I'm a night owl, you guys, so 11:30, I'm just getting started. It was a Bay Area family, so it was only 8:30 there. And the student told me, whichever school has the lowest acceptance, that's what's important to me. That's where I want to go. Now, my view of selectivity may be different than some. I am not in the camp that says selectivity is not important. In fact, you may remember Dan Chambliss and I talked about that. I actually think who you're around does matter. I don't think that defining it exclusive by admit rate is a great way to do that. But I don't fall into the camp of selectivity doesn't matter. So I think selectivity being important is absolutely fine. In fact, it was important for both of my girls in their searches, and I supported that. Now, for some people, selectivity may be very important, and I'm also okay with that. For some people, selectivity may be the most important thing, and that may not be my view. It's not, but your taste buds may be different than mine. But the one thing that I have to draw the line, the one place I have to draw the line is when selectivity is the only thing that matters. When there's so many other variables that are going to impact your college experience and the trampoline that college is supposed to provide for life after college. So friends, never forget, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about YCBK on social media. And you help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating at yourcollegeboundkid.com and clicking the donate button. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. If you have a question or suggestion, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK and hit the orange button and speak, and we will do our best to get your question or your comment in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I'm the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admission and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, 2 admission officers from Colorado, Hilary Dickman from Colorado College, Kate Strickland from CU Boulder, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, Heath Einstein, the Chief Enrollment Officer at TCU in Fort Worth, Carter DeLauro, a co-director of college counseling in New York, and Christina Lopez, the former Dean of Admission at Barnard College, and our international college specialist, Kevin Newton from Dallas, Texas. Our stupendous sound engineer who makes everything happen is Nemanja Matvic from Serbia. Our reliable webmaster is John Rooney. Website updates are done by Joy Stucker. Image editing by Vlad Honchar. And what would we do without our volunteers? Guy Pillsbury, Sony Patel, and Andy Bernstein are all helping us with podcast marketing. Carolyn Wood, Mark Doniger, and Carrie Roberts book interviews with thought leaders. Amanda Dugan, Colleen Sinoki, Nicole Resch, Trevor Smith, Ryan Stepler, and Lynn Labash send thank yous to interviewees. If If you want a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegebounkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly newsletter, YCBK Plus, it's also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights and our upcoming events and receptions. And you can now do searches for past content by using our new Explore and Topics tabs. We really encourage you to explore our past content. We have close to 1,000 hours. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.